So question, you have a little red bob in your hair, a little flower thingy, yes?
I would like to ask you about legendary heroes.
Oh, that's right. Hi, Mirren. Now I recognize you.
Basically, everyone in that show, depending on their hierarchy or what country they're from, everyone speaks in a different way. So how did you kind of determine who should say words, like Mirren says things like absentia, whereas Reiner is like, this sucks, that sucks, like level of colloquialism you used.
Well, again, that's really fun because with a show like Legendary Heroes, it's actually Legend of Legendary Heroes, or as we call it, LOL Heroes. Fun show, really, really fun show. Who here, has anyone here seen it, knows it well? Awesome, well, if you haven't, go treat yourself, it is actually quite fun. Really beautifully animated too, I love the style. But it's one of those examples of a show where there's a huge ensemble cast, and because it's so well developed, I mean, the original is so amazing, your feelings for just about every single character changes dramatically throughout the course of the show, which is fantastic drama. You know, where you start with them is never where you end up. And so you end up feeling much more complicated about even the guy that's only in 3 or 4 episodes than you do in the beginning. It's amazing. But you have this large ensemble cast, and there's kind of a social hierarchy, and beneath the social hierarchy, there's a sort of geopolitical hierarchy. Well, this person's from here, this person's from here, this person's from here. So every scene is a different dynamic because it's a different combination of characters from extraordinarily different backgrounds, sometimes conflicting backgrounds because there's a lot of political strife going on in this imagined world. And so one character might speak very, very highfalutin like Mirren, who might say, you know, a word like absentia, which is just, I love peppering words like that into my scripts because I want people to go, what the hell does that mean? Google, and then they learn a new word. If they just bitch about not knowing what the word is, I'm like, you live in an age where it could not be easier to look up something. When I was a kid, you had to like lift heavy tomes off shelves and risk bashing your skull into pieces from these things that weighed like 500 pounds to look it up because your friends would be like, look it up, dear. All you have to do is Google. You don't even know how to spell it, it'll autocorrect it. Lazy, 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 lazy. If you don't know the word, look it up. You'll learn something. It's really not painful, I promise. But no one here has that problem, so I'm just preaching to the choir, I know. But when you have an opportunity to approach so many different characters like that, and they're in, as I said, every scene is a different dynamic because you have different pairings or different, you know, groups of characters together hashing things out, you know, through dialogue. Sometimes, and I often find this to be true in real life as well, as a writer, my major driving principle is what I find to be language's chief irony is that, and it's kind of a tragic irony, but a beautiful one if you think about it as a writer, is most of the time, and this is true whether you want to admit it of yourselves or not, but most of the time we use language to evade direct communication. Rather than say what's on our minds, we dance around the point. You know, we dress it up, we qualify, we justify. We never just say what's on our minds. There are certain characters who occasionally speak their minds, but they're usually the devastating ones, the one whose job it is to come in and say, "Rah!" and then leave, and everyone else goes, what just happened? But everyone else is keeping this delicate balance between what they feel they need to say versus what they feel they are allowed to say. And when you have two different characters together, for example, in the case of LOL Heroes, you have Reiner, who is very powerful, but extremely reluctant because of extraordinarily powerful feelings of guilt to use his powers. On the other hand, he's often always paired with, what's her name? Ferris, thank you. So many characters, it's hard to keep them straight. And she's kind of his handler, she's sort of his conscience, she sort of keeps him active. He would prefer to nap all day and do nothing because he's an emo kid. Who nevertheless has the power to change things within him. He just doesn't want to use it because he's like, I'm afraid of using my power because people die. And Ferris, she could kill you with a look. She's just that good. She's a knight and she's a sword wielder and she is hot and dangerous and she has no moral qualms about doing what needs to be done. Sometimes that gets her into trouble, but so they're a very interesting balance. You know, you have this person who is, you know, who prefers to be a wallflower versus this other person who's constantly going, no, we need to get out there and do things. That's what we're doing. I'm a woman of action. They are absolute opposites, and what they are is played up so beautifully when they're together because they complement each other. They're constantly having to qualify themselves to each other in the way they don't to themselves. So when you put these characters together that otherwise you wouldn't necessarily know what makes them tick, hearing them talk to another person who is, in this case, their complete opposite, plays up who they are because they're forced to not be obvious, because that's rarely a luxury anybody has, but they're forced to qualify themselves for the other person. And as a writer, I love writing dialogue where characters have to constantly defend their position. So the more at odds they are with each other, the more they do that. And that's a great example. And as far as making them all distinct, it's incredibly easy when you have that many characters. And also, because it's adaptive writing, understand, I'm working with beautiful animation. And whenever I'm stuck writing a line like, what can they say? Or, man, this sounds so much like this character. And it's a good line, but out of context, it's a great line. In context, though, it kind of falls flat because it doesn't sound like something that would come out of their mouths. It sounds more like this character. Why can't I suddenly not write Reiner? And then I look at the animation, and I see the gestures, or I hear the music that's there, and it just kind of leads me in a way that I wish I could tell you how it happens, but it's some unconscious process that I don't know how it works. It just sort of comes out. I find whenever I'm having difficulty writing a piece of dialogue in an ensemble cast like that, is I just kind of sit back and I listen to them. And that sounds a little psychotic, but if I sit back and I just listen with that inner ear that just, has no pre-existing notions of what they should be saying, they start talking in my head and the dialogue starts coming out, and then my job is to just make sure it fits, like the animation. And it often does, ironically enough. So yeah, that's a great example of characters and how to write characters that are not like you, is to find people in real life who are nothing like you, put them all in a room together, and see how being in a room with people so different makes them more obvious to you if you listen, because they're forced to kind of identify and to, basically they become characters under what we call existential pressure. Whenever you're in a room and you're having to, and you feel like, wow, I'm fading into the background in this room, there are two kinds of people, broadly speaking, in the world. There are those who will just allow themselves to fade, but watching how they fade is very instructive, and that is still part of who they are. Or there are people who will be very broad and step out and try to put everything on the table so that they stand out. It's almost like a coping mechanism. And how they do that will tell you a lot about their character as well. So it becomes kind of a melting pot where nothing melts, in a way. So thank you, that's a great question. God, you people are smart. I'm intimidated.